Okay, thank you. On this first question?
I would like you to clarify, because I'm confused, and I think I'm not the only person that is confused in regards to how AB 109 works and the process of AB 109ers being brought to Shasta County, and just what that looks like, why Shasta County, that process, kind of clarify what that process looks like.
Casey,
I think this is
Redding.
Chief and the Sheriff, and probably the courts too can get into this. Chief, you want to start, or Sheriff? Sheriff, you start.
AB 109, or prison realignment, has been the greatest change in our criminal justice system in more than a generation. And what it does is shifts responsibility from the state to the counties. So those low-level offenders, which are considered nonviolent of their current prison commitment, non-serious, and non-serious sexual crimes, when they are released from prison, instead of being on parole, they are shifted to the county under what is called post-release community supervision. Here in Shasta County, that's roughly about right now 400 offenders that are returned to Shasta County. Those are the same people that we sent to prison because of prison offenses, so they're not being bussed in. That becomes a fallacy that some people don't understand. What that means is there's more responsibility on probation for the supervision of those individuals, more responsibility on myself and my organization, because now those same offenders or new offenders for primarily drug crimes and property crimes don't go back to prison, they go to jail. And so what's the problem with that? No room, very good. And that's why it becomes a problem that has been exacerbated since realignment on jails, just not here in Shasta County, but a lot throughout California. Chief?
I sit on the Assembly Bill 109, or Prison Realignment Council for the California Police Chiefs Association. We just had a conference call last week, and chiefs throughout the state are complaining about the same thing. To put it in perspective, and we've got a smaller microcosm of that, but Los Angeles County has 19,500 jail beds, traditionally ran about 75% of capacity. This year with prison realignment, they're expecting between 50 and 60,000 capacity releases of offenders who have been arrested. So that shows you that this is having an impact statewide, and property crime rates are going up statewide. From a police perspective, the challenging thing is that, we made 7,900 something arrests last year. 1,135 of those arrests were repeat offenders, accounting for 4,360 arrests. So what prison realignment has done from our perspective, it's taken ramification out of the criminal justice system. They don't get punishment for doing a crime anymore. Believe me when I tell you that Tom and I, or Sheriff Pasenko and I, lament about this to each other with Chief Johnson on a continual basis. This is not something that Shasta County was
prepared for. And let me clarify for you, Assembly Bill 109 was an attempt by the state of California to control who got released, not a decision by the state to release them. Now, there is a 3-judge federal panel that's making these decisions for the state of California. They could have just said, we're going to cut prison sentences to 50% and you're going to get down to this population, and then violent offenders came out too. So the state tried to adjust who was going to come out by passing the bill to release what kinds of offenders? Drug offenders and property criminals. And what are we having a problem with in Redding right now? Dope and property crime. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that we have an issue. And fortunately, right now, we're getting some traction with that issue. And that's something I'm going to kind of, when I'm done, bat the ball back over to the sheriff to talk about his conversation with the governor the other day. But we need help. And we have talked over the last 2 years as I've done these about how that help may not be coming. And they shoved this on the county so quickly that the money to prepare for it didn't come until after it started. So we have been the power curve, and I think that we've made some pretty good progress with probation and the rehabilitative programs that we're trying to put in place, and the sheriff's success with the work release program on sentenced inmates. The problem, and Melissa will talk extensively, and if you give her a mic to appear in court, we'll be here until midnight. But the sheriff doesn't have the capacity in the jail to hold them pre-sentence. So the Shasta County Most Wanted program was an attempt to bring citizens' awareness to that and put these people in and get them arrested. And that program has netted about pushing close to 300 arrests and 20 sent back to prison. But the problem is that we can't get them, they don't appear in court. So then warrant, we arrest them again, the sheriff's at capacity, they get released again, they don't show up to court again, they get a warrant again, and around and round and round America, around we go. So when you talk about crime solutions, it has to be, from start to finish criminal justice. We need to get ramification back into the criminal justice system so that when people victimize this community, there's some punishment for that.
I'm not sure. Do I shoot like a red flare up to let you know? No, but passion, that's what we need, and that's what everybody has. Let's go down to Josh Lowry, from the DA's office. Josh?
Thank you, Carl. Thank you. I just want to make a point about the changes in law concerning realignment, and one of those changes has been the fact that, as the chief said and as the sheriff said, people no longer go to prison for certain classes of crimes. And it's important to see the length of punishment has not changed. You're still looking at this amount of time in custody. It's just that a whole class of people now stay local as opposed to going to prison. And let me just give you an example of what we see. Auto burglaries. I know there's probably people in this room that have suffered from auto burglaries. It used to be a guy goes out and does an auto burglary. Okay, he's got a clean record. He gets probation. Maybe he does one more. He gets put back on probation with some additional jail time. The third one, you're gone. That person would have been in High Desert State Prison doing time. That is no longer the case because that crime is no longer a prison-eligible crime unless they have a prior strike or a sex background or something along those lines. But for the vast majority, they don't go to prison. So what we try to do is we try to wait until we see a crime that's prison eligible, and then we send them. That's the only way we can get them out of the community when they're out racking up 8 and 10 and 12 cases. And it's just really burdensome on us and the entire system.
Thank you, Josh. Tracy, our Chief Probation Officer, and we'll go back to Tom, or the Sheriff, sorry.
Can't control the microphone. So I just want to add to a little bit of what's been shared. So AB 109, it really brought two populations, and Sheriff Bosanko hit on the first population that's now under our supervision, which is the post-release community supervision. It's those offenders that have the non-violent, non-serious, non-sexual, non-serious sex offenses that Sheriff Bosanko mentioned that would have gone to parole, and now those offenders come to our office. Now, that population since inception, which was October of 2011, has hovered for our department for about 300 offenders. It's staying pretty static. We supervise them for up to a year or longer if they've re-entered custody, but it stays about that number. We've looked at CDCR has given us some projections. It has forecasted out a few years ahead of advance, and we get about 14 to 18 of those offenders on a monthly basis. The other population is the population that Josh just hit on, and that's our mandatory supervision population. And so it's those offenders that would have been sentenced to state prison, but now what happens is in most cases, they get a jail term, and their custody term is split between custody and supervision with our department. That population hovers about 183, but since inception, we've seen a significant increase. If we look back to when it started, that population was only about 38, 40 people. And so as the months pass, because what's been said, these offenders are no longer going to state prison, it's increasing pretty dramatically.
Tom, you can have the last comment on this.
Yes, with those long-term offenders in the Shasta County Jail, I currently have 26 people that are doing between 2 years and 8 years county time. So that becomes a problem. I know in Los Angeles County, there's a person doing 42 years county time. Our jails were never designed for long-term sentences like that, and that's what's causing some of the problems with releases and where do you keep the people for that long of time. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was in my office and I get a call from the governor's office and then return the call, and Governor Brown wanted to speak with me. And he had heard, they get news clipping service as well, and he'd heard some of the problems that are going on here up in Redding and Shasta County. We ended up with over an hour-long conversation talking about crime, jail capacity releases, and he's a very good and engaged speaker. So he said, hey, what about home electronic monitoring and GPS? Yes, we use that. What about alternative custody, such as work programs? Yes, we use that. We send people out of county that are serving sentences in 5 other counties as well. And so we're going back and forth, but I said, Governor, what do you expect when you release people from prison for property crimes and drug crimes? When they get out and they come back to our counties, what are they going to do? They're going to do drugs and steal stuff. And so that's why it's not working that way, and our jails are full. We don't have the capacity right now. So we have to have a short-term fix to get some capacity right now for pre-trial people, because my jail is basically full of pre-trial people. I can't send them out of county because they have to be available for their public defender and be able to get into court. And then we need some room for pre-trial and for the sentenced people. And so that it was a very engaging conversation. I'm also on a prison realignment committee for the California State Sheriff's Association. I serve on their board of directors. We meet with the governor very regularly. He comes to our meetings and we start explaining the problems we're having and then trying to build legislation. We tried to get one where they take prisoners back, instead of doing county time, if they had more than 3 years sentence, send them back to prison. That didn't go through the legislature at all. So we said, okay, let's take another step. How about 10 years or more? They still didn't want to hear any part of that because they still were pushing it on to the counties. And that's what's causing the problems in our community, is a lot of long-term sentences and then plus the people that are coming back here, and we don't have the capacity for it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sheriff. Can everybody hear, can you hear okay back there? Is it sufficient? No. Okay, sound guy, can you crank this up?